Journey to the West, an audio drama series. Chapter 28, Part 1. We speak of the great sage who, despite being banished by Tang monk, was still deep in nostalgia and couldn't help but sigh over the situation. Soon, the waves of the East Sea were in sight. He exclaimed, "I have not walked on this path for 500 years." Those waves, connecting the sky and earth, rumbled like thunder and twisted like wind. Even gods who knew their way across would frown in worry. Not a single village or boat were near. You could hear nothing but gulls. The swimming fish were enjoying their life under the sea, where anxiety only belonged to those above. Xingzhe leapt across the East Seas and soon arrived at the mountain of flower and fruit. Descending from his cloud, he opened his eyes to look. Flowers and grass were gone from the mountain, so were any fog or mist. Peaks had collapsed, and the forest was scorched. How did this happen, you may ask? It was all because he caused havoc in heaven and was taken away to the realm above. This mountain was then burnt to the ground by illustrious sage Erlang Shen, who led all 7 brothers of the Plum Hills. Feeling more grief-stricken than ever, he could only pour his pain into a long poem which documented in detail the bleak and desolate state of his former home. In it, he not only questioned if this level of cruelty was justified, but also reflected on how he himself was responsible for such woe. As the great sage was immersed in misery, noises could suddenly be heard from the slope of fragrant grass, and then, from deep inside the shrubs, some 7 to 8 little monkeys emerged together. Surrounding him, they all kowtowed and called loudly, "My kindred lord, the great sage, you have come home today." The handsome Monkey King asked, "Why aren't you playing around? Instead, you are hiding without a trace. I have been here for a while now without spotting any of you. Why is that?" The monkeys heard that and all cried before answering, "Ever since you were arrested to the realm above, great sage, we've been suffering from hunters. It's becoming unbearable. There's nothing we can do about their strong bows, hunting falcons, and vicious hounds, say nothing about the nets, spears, and hooks either. We therefore had to preserve our lives and dare not come out to play. All we can do is hide deep inside the cave residence and away from the nest outside. When hungry, we pick grass for food before the slopes. When thirsty, we sip fresh water down in the stream. Just now we heard your voice, kindred lord, the great sage. That's why we came out to receive you. We beg that you take care of us." The great sage heard this and became even sadder, so he asked, "How many of you are still on this mountain?" The monkeys answered, "Counting all the old and young, only a little over 1,000 remain." The great sage said, "Back then I had 47,000 imps in my command. Where have they gone now?" The monkeys explained, "Since you were gone, kindred lord, the mountain was set on fire by Erlang Bodhisattva and more than half of us were wiped out. We survived by squatting in wells, crawling into brooks, or hiding under the sheet iron bridge. When we came out again, by the time the fire and smoke subsided, there wasn't enough plants and fruit to feed us. It was hard to get by, so half of us left for somewhere else. The rest of us stayed behind in the mountain to suffer, before the hunters abducted another half of those who remained in the past couple of years." Xingzhe asked, "What are they abducting you for?" The monkeys answered, "When you bring up the hunters, they truly are abominable. Those of us who were hit by arrows, stabbed by spears, brought down with poison, or beaten to death, were all taken away to be skinned and boned, and afterwards boiled with sauce, steamed with vinegar, fried with oil, or stirred with salt, all made into some dish to go with rice. Those of us who were caught by nets or traps are taken away alive to be taught to jump through hoops for performance, do somersaults or stand upside down, beat gongs and drums on the streets, everything to keep people entertained." The great sage heard this and became incredibly outraged, asking, "Who is in charge of the cave now?" The imps answered, "There are Marshals Ma and Liu, Generals Peng and Ba still in charge." The great sage said, "Go report and inform them of my arrival." The imps then burst into the doors and reported, "Kindred Lord, the great sage has come home." Ma, Liu, Beng, and Ba heard the news and hurried out to kowtow before welcoming him inside the cave. The great sage sat at the center seat, while the many monsters gathered and lined up in front of him. They asked, "Kindred Lord, the great sage, we heard that you survived the ordeal and are now escorting a tongue monk to West Heaven for scriptures. Why aren't you heading west and instead return to your home mountain?" The great sage said, "Little ones, you have no idea. That Tang Sanzang has no concept of who is wise or dumb. I captured monsters and subdued demons for him along the way, exhausting all the tricks I learned in life. Several times straight I managed to kill a monster spirit only to have him accuse me of committing murder. He didn't want me for a disciple and banished me back here. There is a letter as proof that I shall never take orders from him again." The monkeys all clapped and burst into laughter, yelling, What fortune, why be a monk at all? Might as well come home and lead us for a few years of fun." They then called, "Quickly bring over the coconut wine as reception for our kindred lord." The great sage said, "This is not the time for wine yet. Let me ask you, how often do the hunters come up to our mountain?" Ma and Liu answered, "Great sage, there is no exact time for that. They harass us here every single day." The great sage asked, "Why aren't they coming today?" Ma and Liu said, "We do expect them to come soon." The great sage thereby ordered, "Little ones, go out and find those broken rocks brittle from the fire. Carry them over and pile them up in groups of 20 to 30 or 50 to 60. I will have use for them." Like whirlwind, those little monkeys hopped all over the place and collected many piles of rocks. The great sage examined the results and instructed, "Little ones, go hide in the caves while Elderson wills my magic." And so the great sage went up to the top of the mountain for a look. What he saw on the south side were over 1,000 men and their horses, appearing as they beat drums and gongs. All of them were accompanied by falcons and hounds and equipped with knives and spears. The Monkey King had a careful look at those men and how very menacing they were. Fine men, truly courageous they seemed, decorated from head to toe with the finest clothing and weapons, accompanied by the strongest of animals, sticks coated with glue and prongs by the thousands alongside nets and rope. Shrieking and roaring together, their presence was like a sky full of stars. The great sage saw those people swarming onto his mountain and became outraged. Gesturing in his hand and reciting a spell with his mouth, he sucked a mouthful of air from the southeast direction before blowing it toward them, creating a violent gust. What marvelous wind! You could see the earth being turned and trees pulled down. Waves rose like mountains as the universe went dark. Shaking and waving, plants let out the noise of ferocious beasts. This wind carried sand and stones into the air, but spared no mercy for men. The great sage created this huge wind which threw the broken rocks off, dancing wildly in the air. Those poor men and their horses. Men broken and horses injured as their blood spilled on the rough ground. How will you even get home when your soul is destined to wander in desolation? Descending from his cloud, the great sage clapped and laughed out loud. What luck! What great luck! Ever since I submitted to the tongue monk and became a monk, he had been telling me all the time that doing good for 1,000 days is not nearly enough, but doing evil for 1 day is already excessive. Does that saying actually exist? When I followed his ways and killed a couple of monster spirits, he was already blaming me for committing murder. Yet when I came home today, I managed to put an end to this many hunters." He then called, "Little ones, come out now." Those monkeys were waiting for the violent wind to subside when they heard the great sage calling them, so they all jumped out one by one. The great sage said, "Head down the south mountain, rip the clothes off from the dead hunters, wash away the blood and wear them to keep yourselves warm. Push the bodies of the dead men into the depth of the abyss. The dead horses can be carried away to be skinned and made into boots. Marinate the meat so we can take our time enjoying them. Use all the bows, arrows, spears, and knives to help you practice martial arts. As for those colorful flags and banners, collect them for my use." The monkeys all took their orders. The great sage then unstitched and washed the banners before putting them together to make a multi-color flag with 14 characters written on it. 重修花果山，复整水帘洞，齐天大圣 meaning rebuilt mountain of flower and fruit, restored water curtain cave, heaven equaling great sage. Erecting a pole to hang the flag outside the cave, he spent his days recruiting monsters and beasts as well as accumulating provision and food. The word monk was never mentioned again. He had great friendly connections and a lot of tricks at hand, so he went to the dragon kings of the 4 seas to borrow some sweet dew and divine water in order to wash the mountain back to its evergreen state. At the front, they planted elms and willows, and at the back pines and nanmu, peaches, plums, and dates, all ready for them to enjoy. Free and at ease, they lived to their heart's content. We will speak no more on that. We now turn to the Tang monk who succumbed to suspicion and banished the monkey. Climbing onto his saddle and mounting the horse, he had Bajie clear the path in front of him and Sha monk carrying the luggage as they headed westward. After passing the White Tiger Ridge, they suddenly came upon a hilly forest full of crawling vines and creepers, as well as green cypress and pines. Sanzang called out, "Disciples, these roads are rugged and hard to pass through. Moreover, the pine forest is thick and the woods are dark. We must be very careful. I fear there are evil monsters about." Look at the fool who heightened his spirit before instructing Sha monk to control the horse. He, on the other hand, used his rake to clear the path ahead, leading the Tang monk straight into the pine forest. As they were walking, the elder reined in the horse and said, "Bajie, I am really starving after a long day. Where could you find me some vegetarian food to eat?" Bajie said, "Master, please dismount the horse and wait here. Let old Bo go look for some." So the elder got off his horse, and Sha monk put down his load before taking out the bowl and handing it to Bajie. Bajie then said, "I'm leaving." The elder asked, "Where will you be going?" Bajie said, "Don't bother asking. I will make sure to find you vegetarian food, be it through ice or fire, in freezing snow or boiling oil." Look at him, heading out of the pine forest and crossing over 10 li westward. He could not come across a single residence, for it was truly a no-man's land. The fool was having a hard time walking as he muttered in his mind, "When Xingzhe was still around, anything that old monk needs can be obtained. Now it becomes my job. It really is a case of knowing the cost of firewood and rice only when you keep house, understanding the love of father and mother only when you raise children. To be honest, there is really nowhere to beg for any food." As he walked on, he became increasingly drowsy. He thought to himself, "If I make my way back now and tell the old monk I couldn't find anywhere to beg for vegetarian food, he would not believe that I walked such a long distance. I might as well hang around for another 时辰 before reporting back to him. Forget about it. I will just take a nap in the grass." And so the fool put his head in the grass and started napping. At the time, he told himself he would get right up after a snooze. But what do you expect from a fatigued traveler? As soon as he put his head down, he just snored into deep sleep. We speak not of Bajie falling asleep on the spot, but instead return to the elder who was still in the forest. Ears burning and eyelids ticking, he was feeling rather uneasy all over, so he hurriedly turned around to ask Sha monk. Wu Neng left to find vegetarian food. Why hasn't he returned after such a long time? Sha monk said, "Master, don't you understand? He knew the journey westward is full of families who feed monks. He's got a huge stomach after all. Why would you be on his mind? You will have to wait until he's had his fill." Sanzang said, "You are right. If he really is lingering over vegetarian food somewhere, where shall we meet him? It's getting dark now, and this is not the place to stay. We've got to find lodging." Sha monk said, "It's fine, master. Do sit here for now. Let me go look for him." Sanzang agreed. That's right. It doesn't matter whether there is vegetarian food. It's more important to find lodging." And so Sha monk grabbed his treasure staff and came straight out of the pine forest to search for Bajie.